My name is Megan Levens. I am a cartoonist and comic book illustrator. I've been doing comics professionally for about 10 years now. And before that, I worked in storyboarding for advertising. I also did a lot of, retail jobs too. Worked at some art supply stores, Hot Topic, all of that. But yeah, I grew up just north of St. Louis. Went to school at the Savannah College of Art and Design in 2000. And they have a sequential art program, and I kind of always knew I wanted to tell stories with drawing. And sequential art seemed like the perfect way to bring all that together. I grew up reading comics that I could find on the spinner racks at Walmart. I grew up watching anime and fantasy movies. My mom found this, so I thought this would be a great way to start, is to show you what I was doing in high school, which is absolutely like cringe to me right now. But yeah, I always knew that what I wanted to do was take images and tell stories with them, because I'm not very good at writing, but I can pull pictures together and create characters. So that was always a big love of mine. Savannah College of Art and Design has a sequential art program. It's one of the few schools that does. And at the time, that was just the best movie for me, was to go get, an education learning how to do storytelling, how to lay out images in a way that would lead your eye across the page and help communicate a story effectively. So yeah, I began working. This is another really, really early example of learning to break down comic pages. And obviously, you probably recognize this is from The Empire Strikes Back. The assignment was to take a movie scene and break it down into individual images and create a comic page out of it. You also might notice, some of you with eagle eyes might notice, that there's not really a lot of room for word balloons on this, because I was still learning to do that. But yeah, so I started going to comic conventions after I graduated, just trying to meet other creators and connect with editors. And so I lived in LA at the time, so I would travel down to San Diego every year, stay in a room with like 5 other people, and bring my portfolio to Comic-Con and just talk to whoever would listen. And sometimes it was a dead end. Sometimes I got portfolio reviews that made me cry. And other times I made connections, like with my friend Jamie Rich, who gave me my very first comics gig. This was for a story called 2 Wheels, 2 Feet. And it was just a little slice of life romance that he wrote for an anthology series. It was our first project together, but it kind of gave me a chance to push out of my comfort zone, draw some architecture. And once we had this that we could show people, sort of to prove us as a team, we got hired on 2 different projects. The first was called Aries and Aphrodite, and it was a graphic novel that came out from Oni Press in 2014, I believe. And it's a romantic comedy about a divorce lawyer and a wedding planner who get together. So it was very, very cute. And almost at the same time, we drew, it's a page from Aries and Aphrodite. And then almost at the same time, we drew a period horror comic called Madame Frankenstein, which I'm still very, very proud of. Set in 1930s Boston, about a mad scientist who resurrects a girl he was obsessed with, and he tries to mold her into his perfect woman with the expected results. So these are my first 2 published comics, and they were both creator owned, which means that if anything ever happens with either of these, and again, it's been 10 years, but if it gets made into a movie or adapted to some other form, we, the creators, have full ownership of it. So that's kind of cool. You don't usually get paid a whole lot up front, but you own this forever. And if someone finds it and it becomes the next Walking Dead or the next, I don't know, Captain Marvel, then it's all yours. But those put me on comic shelves, and because I had been doing Madame Frankenstein with the horror, it caught the attention of people at Dark Horse, who gave me my first licensed gig on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You got a Buffy fan? Yeah, that was my reaction when I got the email. So for licensed books, I had to do likeness tests. I actually drew this picture of Sarah Michelle Gellar and they sent it to her. She had to approve it. So that's always kind of nerve-wracking to do, but excuse me. But yeah, it was a really great opportunity and it broke me into licensed comics and established me as someone who could draw likenesses of actors who play characters, and that led to basically the next 7 to 8 years of my career. This is another creator-owned book that I did called Angel City, and it was a period noir piece, so like a crime drama. And interestingly, almost all of these are someone else doing the colors. I do the line work, and coloring is a completely different job in comics because of the tight production deadlines. So this is Nick Filardi. I love him. He's one of my favorite colorists to work with. This was another book that happened because of Buffy, you know, doing supernatural, female-led stories. This was a graphic novel series about 3 witches who go on a road trip. And then the licensed work led me eventually to Star Trek, which I've been doing for about 7 years now. I started off doing one that was based off of the recent movies with Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto. And I've been working now, I just finished working on one that allowed me to kind of design my own starship. That was really cool to do, and to do some costume designs for established characters, but to put them in clothes that I thought would be more fun. So there's a lot of opportunities within comics. This is rambling. I'm not a very good public speaker. I apologize. This is what I do all day. So, but yeah, there are a lot of opportunities in comics. I kind of think of it as being an entire movie crew, because you're the costume designer, you're the props person, you are the cameraman, you are the lighting, you are the writer, you're the actors, you're the director. So it's kind of like making movies for control freaks. But so that's kind of what I've been doing for several years now, is almost exclusively working on Star Trek for IDW Publishing. And my process a little bit like for comics, it's usually several stages. I'm a line artist, so I typically just draw the outlines and someone else will color it, someone else will do the balloons, someone else will do all the trade dressing. This was for the cover, so I'll get a description of, hey, this is the first issue. We kind of want to show off these characters, so can you find a way to incorporate the ship and all the characters? So this was where I went, like the ship flying straight at you. This is a loose thumbnail. I'll send this to the editors. They'll show it to the licensors, and as long as the licensors think, okay, this is a good representation of like what our brand is or what this story is, then they'll say, okay, cool, take this to tighter pencil. This is the finished pencil. It's cropping kind of weird there, I apologize, but this is where I have to be really tight on the likenesses. A few of the actors from this show did have likeness approval, so they would send this to them and make sure they've signed off on it. But once I get the okay on that, this is the pencil pass. Then it will go to inks, which is in traditional old comics, this would be the stage. Inking it was basically for reproduction. Now it's basically, you could take your pencil stage and that could be your inks. It's whatever you prefer. But back in the old days of like shooting things and old printing styles, inking was the way to make the lines stand out on cheap printed paper for like, you know, the old Wonder Woman and Superman comics. So I still think of it as inking, even though this is all done digitally at this point. But yeah, so at this point, this is passed off, and once it's approved, then it goes to my colorist, Charlie Kirkhoff, who he did these interiors with me, and he's amazing. So it winds up being, it's a very collaborative process too, but the sheet that I handed out is an actual page from one of these scripts. And I thought, you know, if you guys wanted to, we could walk through breaking down like how I lay out a comic page and think about trying to tell a story. It's a pretty simple page and hopefully not too scary, but the main skill set for comics is being able to capture enough of the action that you need in one panel and enough detail without overdoing it. You need to be able to lead the eye to the next panel. So like on the first, the script direction would have been something like, view over Pike's shoulder. This is Captain Pike looking at little old lady. And she looks grumpy. Like that would be all the information I would be given. So it's up to me to decide kind of how I want to set that up, as long as it follows the direction looking over his shoulders. Could have just put him out of the shot entirely, just his shoulder. Could have gone closer, could have gone further away, but I decided this looked kind of pleasing as its own little illustration, and it had enough room up there above their heads that the dialogue of them speaking would be able to fit there in the final printed piece. And yeah, this next panel will be like, Pike tries to make Pike tries to say something friendly to charm her over, and Spock looks unimpressed. So, you know, I kind of try to think about, in this case, because these are actors who are playing these roles, I try to think about how do these actors move? What's their body language? What are their expressions like? So even though this is a comic and not the show, I want it to feel and look as much like these actors and these characters. And, you know, for this, they moved to a different location. So when you're changing scenes, you want to show like a wide shot and kind of establish where you are. We've gone from outside in her garden to this closet somewhere in the back of her house. So we want it to feel different. We want it to be obvious that we've changed where we are. And pulling back and showing the figures fully can be a way to like break up a lot of headshots, keep it from being too monotonous. But these are some likeness tests that I had to do for this. They wanted full turnarounds, so. But yeah. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Okay, awesome. Yeah, so again, these are loose thumbnails for covers, but and then the final that wound up getting, yeah. This was a fun one to do. But yeah, it's basically just you're going off of a loose description or a script page like that, and then you figure out kind of what the writer's trying to communicate. And so I'll get this and I'll be like, okay, I'm laying these out, page 7, and I'll take this page, I'll print these out, and I will just scribble straight on it. And I'll be like, all right, I scan over it and I say, okay, we've got 5 panels, so I need to make room for 5 different boxes. They don't always have to be, let's see if we can go back to a page. They don't always have to be contained. So like this one, I thought, let's make it more expansive. Let's have it open. I did give it some kind of a border for my colors so he didn't have to make stuff up and get lost. But, you know, this one kind of, for the reader to sort of sit and breathe on this panel a little bit and take this environment in. It's larger, it's in the background, and it does kind of extend past the borders of the other ones. So that's a way of saying to the reader, saying to the eye, you can hang out on this panel a little bit. Spend a little more time here than you do on the next one. So with this script, the first panel is on Ortegas, joyous. You don't need to know who Ortegas is to just know that this is going to be a shot of a character looking excited, looking happy. It's up to you how you want to frame that. And panel 2, Pike goes over to Spock, who is slightly bent over the control panel, head down. Pike, big shiny magnet, right? Spock, you all right? So you kind of get that this character is speaking and then his attention is drawn to the body language of the other character. So, this might be a bigger panel. Now, this is not, the script does not correspond to this, because I want you guys to kind of have a little bit of your own mental freedom to come up with layouts for this. But, you know, this one might be a larger panel because there's a little more going on. There's two figures. You need to be able to see, you know, if you've established in a previous page where they are in the scene, you're kind of thinking, okay, so Pike is standing here and Spock's at a little table over here, you know. Where are they in relation to each other in this scene? So it's probably going to be a bigger panel. You're going to have more background to show where they are and to show their body language, to show what's happening, to show one character turning around to look at the other one. So that's something to keep in mind. Panel 3 on Spock as he straightens himself up, composing himself. I am fine, Captain. We should assess damages now. So, you know, this would be a tighter shot again of Spock. And I broke it again. There we go. This would be a tighter shot. You'd focus on one character, and the writer here, they don't give you a whole ton of information. They're just giving you kind of the emotion that you need to know and the actions that you need to show. So for this, you know, you'd think about how this character is kind of straightening themselves up and the expression that might be on his face as he's recovering from being kind of hunched over and a little bit overwhelmed. Panel 4, Pike puts a hand on Spock's shoulder. I'm assessing your damages if something's wrong. So this is two friends. This is a character kind of reaching over and checking in on his friend. You'll have to, you know, you'll want to think about how to frame that, what camera angle you want to use, and think about, again, the body language and gesture of someone checking in on their friend, kind of leaning in a little bit, and also making sure that there's room somewhere in there for those word balloons that are going to go there, because your letterer will go online and talk about how you don't leave room if you don't. But and then panel 5 will be your last panel. It'll take up whatever's left on the page. And on Mitchell, alarmed. Don't need to know who Mitchell is. You just need to know it's someone who's reacting with alarm to something that they've just discovered. And it's very close on this one character. It could be, you know, it could be a medium shot. It could be a very close up on the face. It could be a shot over the shoulder looking at her console with all her information. The writer really leaves a lot of that up to you. So a way that I start, let's see if I can, I'll just sketch along. When I start doing comic layouts, I usually just kind of draw.
What program are you working in?
This is Clip Studio Paint. So I've been using this for my comics for 4 years now, and it's pretty amazing. There's a lot of great brushes for it. It has tools for designing comic book panels. So basically it has a little tool here that you can drag and create a panel, and then it's got layer masks that keep everything you draw inside that panel. So it's super handy for me. But at this stage, you know, doing a layout, I'll be like, okay, so we've got one panel and there's not a lot in it, but I'm kind of thinking, what if that panel is like long and skinny at the top with one character in it and it's kind of close on them? So I'm kind of, at this stage, starting to just noodle around and figure out how I might want to tell this story. So this, you know, I could put a little hint at the background there to show where she is. There's her chair. Panel 2, Pike goes over to Spock. This is a bigger panel, so I kind of want it to go across the whole bottom of the page, or the whole width of the page, and give it a little room. In fact, at this stage, I kind of look at it and I think, maybe this will be an open panel, you know. Maybe they'll give the reader a cue that, you want to hang out and you want to spend a little more time on this panel is where you want to focus your attention for a little bit. I also think about speaking order, so and the order in which you're going to view the character. So if two characters are speaking in the same panel, you kind of want to make sure that whoever's speaking first is furthest left. Like you read left to right. So Pike is saying something, and again, if Spock were responding, but yeah, here's Pike. You want him kind of far left. He's got a little dialogue, so you kind of think, okay, maybe that first balloon's going to go there, and that second one's going to go there. And then here's Spock back here, like, oh man, I got a headache. So he's hunched over his little station there. And again, super loose at this stage because I just want to see how this looks before I do anything tight enough to send to the editor. Panel 3, I'm like, well, there's not much happening. It's just Spock. So let's do like a tall, skinny panel. I love tall, skinny panels. They're like my go-to. And you can have him kind of a close-up of him. So maybe he's, he should be straightening himself up. There's a lot of decision-making that happens at this phase too. So, sometimes I'll do this right on the page, like, because then I can start working out some of these basic ideas before I ever really lay everything out. But yeah, maybe he's kind of like sitting up and looking back over his shoulder like, nah, I'm cool, man. It's all right. And panel 4, I'm like, okay, we're going to want it a little bigger. There's 2 characters. And yeah, Pike puts a hand on Spock's shoulder. For this, again, there's 2 characters in this, but Spock doesn't really say anything. So we can put Pike kind of, if we want to keep, Spock was right here in this panel. So we're going to keep him on the same side, just for continuity's sake. A really good thing that I learned or that I was taught was to maybe look at books on cinematography and look at some of the things that camera operators in film do, because there's little subtle things about people moving in frame, or if you shift where the camera is, that screw with your eye and you don't even think about it. So when you're designing a comic page or an illustration or a set of illustrations that move to tell a story, you kind of want to keep people looking like they're on the same side of the frame, even if you move the camera, because otherwise it just feels like something's off. So for this, we'll have Pike here, and he's coming up behind Spock, saying, hey, you okay? Spock's sitting down. Spock's like, yeah, I'm okay. So, and again, you're like, it's not a ton of dialogue. You just want to make sure that there's a little space here for your poor letterer. I don't usually end up talking to my letterers as much as I do my colorists. At this stage in my career, I'm pretty much in contact with my colorists a lot, which is nice because then I can, as I'm drawing, I can say, hey, is this going to be a pain for you later, or is this going to make your life easier? What can I do to format the file I'm getting you? So it's a very collaborative process, but it depends on how well you know the other people in the pipeline. Fortunately, I know Charlie pretty well, and he'll be honest with me and say, I hate the way you did these layers. Please, please, please don't do that again. And then, the last panel, it's like on Mitchell, alarmed. Okay. And actually, Pike has some dialogue here, so maybe we could have, Mitchell could be, see, it's kind of lining it. See, I'm working out a lot of things as I'm just noodling here, but yeah, that's lining up kind of odd and it's looking a little repetitive. So then I'll start over and be like, maybe Mitchell's really close up here. Maybe it's a little bit of a Dutch angle, kind of tilted a little bit for some drama, and Pike could be really small in the background here.
And great point about what's in orange, and
if you decide that this looks kind of, maybe we'll put the dialogue boxes on the bottom. So let's just scoot this drawing up here a little bit. Yeah, the word balloons could go down here. But, so that's kind of the process of like working this out and thinking about how the story's gonna flow, thinking about how these characters, and you know, it's just circles and sticks at this point, but you're already considering the environment, you're already considering the storytelling, body language, speaking order, and you know, trying to make sure that the camera angles and the shots look different enough that it doesn't just wind up being a lot of very similar mid shots, waist up, same pose. But yeah. What's going to be interesting is seeing how that compares to what I actually did. Because yeah, this is that page. This is how that page turned out. So yeah, actually, I went a little jazzier with Ortega's. I love Dutch angles too, especially when you're drawing Star Trek because it is a lot of talking heads and you kind of want to make it look exciting. But yeah, you can kind of see what I ended up deciding to do with that page of script. And this would be the level of detail that I send for approval. I totally didn't put Pike in that final panel. I wound up going the over the shoulder. But again, it's like I do 20 pages of this and sometimes I completely forget the decisions I made before. But yeah, this was given the go-ahead. This was what the final page looked like in ink. And yeah. Does anyone have any questions about comics or? A page can take, it depends on the page, but so like this page took me probably from like starting the layout. The layouts take me maybe 20 minutes to a half an hour a page. I try to keep it no longer than that. I want my layouts when I send them to editors to be legible enough, and especially on a licensed book, I want them to be able to tell characters apart. So at least like indicating this guy's got a goatee and he's bald, so they know that that's that character. And I kind of draw in her hair and a little bit of her cheekbones. They know who that is. When I take it to finals, this page would have been maybe 2 to 3 hours, so not too long because it's pretty simple. And then something like this was a day and a half because it depends on the content of the page, like how detailed it is, and if it's lots of ships or detailed backgrounds. Usually they give me about 4 to 6 weeks per issue. It's 20 to 22 pages an issue. So trying to do like 5 pages a week is pretty much my sweet spot. Like making sure 5 pages are done per week. Yeah, because it's, you know, and that's a lot of the reason why I started working digitally. I used to work completely pencil on paper and ink. When it came to Star Trek, I realized I could make changes so much quicker working digitally now that programs have caught up. So being able to just kind of draw loosely like you were just seeing, and then almost do the final, instead of having like a tight pencil pass and then an ink pass, I can do a really loose pencil pass and then a tight ink pass and kind of figure out some of the drawing stuff in my ink phase. It saved me a lot of time. So, but yeah, it's really depends on like what's on the page. So you have those days where you got 3 pages in a row and it's just faces of people you love drawing and you blaze through them. And then you hit something like this and you're like, okay, we're gonna be here a while. This was a poster design that I got to do. They invited me one year to go on Star Trek The Cruise, which was a lot of fun. It is every bit as nerdy as you think it is on a boat. But yeah, does anyone have any questions like about, I don't know, if you guys have, I assume you're all considering, you know, like careers in the arts, and if there's any questions about like what comics would be like or illustration would be like. One thing that, yes.
Is it just like issue after issue, or do you get like time?
It depends on the contract. So like for this series, I was told I was going to do 6 issues, and I had to do each issue in about 6 weeks, and then the next one would start right after. When that wrapped up a couple months ago, then I didn't have another contract that's starting until next week. So I've had like 2 months off now. I don't know what to do with myself. But yeah, sometimes you'll have big gaps between them. Sometimes you'll get a long run on a comic, like they'll say, here's an ongoing, and we're just going to hire you for 12 issues at a time. So that's a year of work at a time that you're contracted for. And yeah, it'll be, 1 issue, you finish it, and then you're right into the next one. But, it's a time management thing. I take days off. I take weekends off to hang out with my friends. I work from home by myself, so I take time to walk my dogs during the day to like get up and get away from the desk and move and talk to other people. So yeah, you build in breaks as you're working on it, but sometimes it can be just, issue after issue after issue if you're lucky, and then you might get a little buffer for a while. So it's just when the work, it's freelancing, it's like when the work comes in and when it doesn't. So that's a really good question though. Yes?
What's your degree in?
Technically in sequential art, yeah. And it's interesting because at the time, like going to school for sequential art was absolutely the best decision for me. I don't know, I mean, it depends on the school. I haven't gone back to SCAD for a while, so I don't know what the program's like now. And I don't know if other schools have offered sequential art. It was really good to get the training in the storytelling, in cinematography, to learn from people who had those skill sets of storytelling with drawing. So there are also people who are, I don't want to say self-taught, but there are people who get into comics because they have gone to Comic-Con, like Planet. I don't know if any of you here have been to Planet Comic-Con here in Kansas City. Yes, Planet is amazing, and I will tell you, walk up to Artist Alley, talk to the writers and artists, because we love young artists. When I was younger, I lived in super rural Missouri, and I didn't have anyone to talk to about doing this. So whenever some young artist comes to my table, I'm like, please show me your work. I want to talk to you. I want to tell you everything. Because I'm like, I didn't have that, and I want to give that back and be able to be like, I'll explain to you anything you need. But yeah, just you can go and talk with professionals, because we're right there at a table all weekend, and we would love to talk to you and share our experiences, give advice on storytelling or on your skills. And so you can learn a lot about storytelling, maybe without going to a traditional, like going to a sequential art program. Like you could get an art degree and learn the storytelling fine details and those skills from studying stuff online. And yes.
Do you plan on having a table at this year's Planet?
Yes, I am there every year, and I do have some business cards I can hand out. I'll make sure, like, if anyone's interested, you will have my info before you leave. But yeah, I always table in Artist Alley. They're super kind, and they bring me every year, and it's such a great show. Yes.
Has there been like any times where you've like had no idea what to do with like what you're doing?
Yes. Sometimes you get really complicated pages, and actually I'm going to pull up a really complex one. These have all been in print, so it's totally okay for me to share these. I'm going to bring up a really complicated page where I had to kind of just go a little nuts with my imagination because the script was very vague, but in a good way. So like this was let's see, I think issue 21, there was some, yeah. So yeah, this was described as like a meeting place of the gods. And that was the description. It was like, they didn't say, here's what this space should look like, here's how these characters should be arranged. Just, these are the gods. And they are all sitting around together, having a meeting, talking to several like humans. And So I kind of just sat and like thought for a long time before coming up with sort of a circular, like a cylindrical space where, and it'll take a hot second to load this up because it's a huge page, but I was like, well, this looks really simple. The colorist is going to do a lot of heavy lifting here. But I was like, what if this is just a big cylinder of energy and they're kind of just sitting on these amorphous, like I was like, I don't know what else to do with this. So they're kind of all just floating here and they're in these pillars of energy and I hope this works. And turns out they really liked it. So that's what we went with. But yeah, sometimes you'll get a script that's very complicated. They give you too much detail. Like, I think the sweet spot is when they tell you, here's the action we need to see. We need to see someone picking up a coffee cup because that's important later. We need to see someone's face because they're talking. We need to see a detail in the background. But if they tell you, and then the clock on the wall is set to 9:15, there's a cat licking themselves, we want to see every Post-it note on their desk, and the fact that there's dishes in the sink, and I'm like, is any of that important to the scene, to the story? Because otherwise you just gave me way too much, and I'm reading this, and it all hit me, and I don't know where to start. So sometimes you get comic scripts like that, and you're like, I gotta take a second and back up and figure out what's actually important here. Other times you just get someone says something and you have no other direction. So you have all the options open to you, and that could be decision paralysis. So it's, yeah.
So do they just give you the character and then you just like make it look like the character?
Yeah, for licensed stuff, yeah, they'll tell me who the characters are. For the book that I'm about to start, it's a new actor playing a role that hasn't been seen before, so they've sent me some advanced photos from the movie. For this, these are characters that I know, like these are from really old Star Trek episodes in the 60s, so I was able to look up photo reference on Google of them, but they'll call that out, and if I don't know who the character is, because sometimes, I'm a big nerd, I know a lot of this stuff, this is my fandom, but sometimes I don't know this character, so I'll say, who is this? What episode were they in? So I can look that up. Sometimes it's a new character and I get to design them. Sometimes it's a new spaceship and I get to design what that looks like. So it's kind of like putting my own little stamp on the world.
Yeah, you still do like traditional art, such and such.
Very much, yeah. Like in this little break that I've had, I've been playing with watercolors again. I've been doing acrylic painting. So yeah, if I had my way, I would be working penciling digitally and printing it out and inking traditionally. Because I like being able to make the changes quickly and easily on the computer or on the iPad, but I like inking by hand better. I like the feel of traditional ink. It's just a time thing mostly. But yeah, you'll find whatever flow works for you the best and whatever tool works for you the best. And if it's an iPad, if it's ink, if it's a Sharpie, on lined paper, it does not matter, at least for comics. Use what you feel comfortable with, because that's going to be the way you tell better stories.